And we are back with another episode of the Kyle Lanslow Show, and I am extremely excited about the guest I have on today's show. Of all the interviews I have done over the years, top 5 favorite interviews are the one I did with you a few years ago. So, everybody, welcome Captain Matt Ho to the show. He is recently featured in a new documentary, Bodyguard of Lies, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that, but also just want to mention to people that you publish quite a bit on matthewho.substat.com and to check that out. And we do reprint you over at antiwar.com, and we definitely appreciate you letting us do that. So, Matt, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Kyle. Thanks. It's good to see you. It's good to be here with you. I appreciate that. I appreciate what you guys do at antiwar.com. You guys really are indispensable. But also too, I really appreciate what you just said there about the interview. You've done a lot of interviews, so I'm grateful for your kind words.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Matt. And I'm sure we have another great one here for the audience today. First up, I want to talk to you about Afghanistan, your role in the new documentary. Then get into Netanyahu on TikTok, lies at the UN, and Trump meeting with Netanyahu. So, kind of unbelievable, right, Matt, that you produced a documentary about a war that ends a few years ago. And just as it's coming out, the president is making statements about going back to the Bagram Air Base. And so, I did want to start here with the current news, Matt, and just ask you, would it even be possible, even if the Taliban said, sure, you could go back to Bagram, could the U.S. actually maintain an airbase there, just a single airbase? Isn't that place pretty high up in the mountains, hard to get to, not so easy to get supplies in and out of?
During the Cold War and at other times, the United States Army trained for airfield seizures. That's one of the prime reasons for having a regiment of Army Rangers, is to do things like that. Conceivably, yes, we have the forces, we have the ability to insert units like that. It would be very difficult. It would be insane in a lot of ways. I don't have a more academic way to describe it than that. It would be nuts. But conceivably, the U.S. military could do a forced entry operation and take Bagram Air Base. Holding it would require tens of thousands of people. Like, it just doesn't make sense at all. And to say that you're going to do this, and that as if the Afghans would somehow be amenable to it, it just shows that these decades. I mean, the U.S. role in Afghanistan goes back to the early 70s. These decades of generation after generation of Americans who have, to put it politely, ineptly murderously meddled in Afghanistan for decades, still don't understand anything about the Afghan people. The idea that we could just trade or even take it from them is just preposterous. Like I said, conceivably we could, but the cost would be enormous, and we'd have to garrison it with tens of thousands of troops. It would be rocketed every day. It'd be a mess. It is quite a coincidence that Donald Trump made those statements about taking Bagram Air Base. I would put that, in lines with in terms of like the feasibility of it, less than taking back the Panama Canal or seizing Greenland or something like that, But it is a nice coincidence for the film, though, Bodyguard of Lies, which I didn't produce. I'm just a guy who they interviewed and who runs his mouth in it. But it's produced by Alex Gibney, directed by Dan Krause. It's Jigsaw Productions, and people can watch it on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, and I know not everybody has a subscription to Paramount Plus, but my plan is I got a friend who does, and so not only am I going to watch it, but I'm going to force my buddy to watch it. So even if you don't have it, that's an option for you. Now,
Right.
I want to give you a few minutes just to kind of what does the film cover? Is it the whole war? What's kind of your role in it, and maybe one thing to get people to watch it.
It's the film covers the period of the American occupation of Afghanistan, so from 2001 to 2021. And in 90 minutes, the filmmakers pack in various angles of the war that were dominated, manipulated, controlled by the deceit of the American government. It shows that 4 successive American presidential administrations, both Democrat and Republican, deliberately lied, that the lying about the Afghan war in order to sustain the war, to escalate it, to hide it, was deliberate and orchestrated. And it is a great entry point for people like your friend, maybe, who does not know much about the Afghan war. It touches on various aspects, the military aspect of it, the diplomatic aspect of it, the financial aspect of it, the human aspect about it. And it's packed into 90 minutes, as I said. I think the importance of this film is in the same way, Kyle, that when people would ask me what books to read about the Iraq or the Afghan wars, I would always say two books: David Halberstam's The Best and the Brightest, and Neil Shahan's A Bright Shining Lie. Both books about the Vietnam War. And I said, if you read these books about the Vietnam War, you will understand the American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think the same is for this film. If you watch this film about the Afghan war, you will understand not just the American war in Afghanistan, but all modern American wars. And you can make a point even wars previous to the modern era.
Yeah, great point, Matt. Now, one of the things I think I learned best from you about Afghanistan is why the counterinsurgency there will fail. And so I got a clip to play for you, then a question. So, Chris, can we play this next clip?
As you know, Mr. President, I spent over 37 years in the U.S. Army, and I was a soldier, not a diplomat. So I hope you'll forgive me if I speak with the directness of the old soldier that I am as I get the first question out of the way. Because the fact is that we were on different sides when I was commanding the surge in Iraq. You were, of course, detained by U.S. forces for some 5 years, including, again, when I was the 4-star there. And here you are now as the president of Syria. I just want you to tell you, really on behalf of all the people who are here, that this conversation has truly filled me with enormous hope. It has been very, very heartening and illuminating. Your vision is powerful and clear. Your demeanor itself is very impressive as well. How are you holding up under all this pressure? Are you getting enough sleep at night? Again, I've been there, and it is so very, very hard. And your many fans, and I am one of them, we do have worries.
So, Matt, I need to ask you, did you maybe teach Petraeus a lesson a little too well that counterinsurgency can't possibly work? So we need to embrace the insurgency, and maybe that's why he backed Al Qaeda in Syria, and he's up on stage in New York City with the founder of Al Qaeda from Syria, lauding this man as if he's some revolutionary hero.
Well, this is why Petraeus is such a shallow cretin of an individual. Petraeus understood what happened in Iraq when he was there in terms of the reduction of the violence that begins in earnest in 2007 as a political act, as a result of political efforts. In the fall of 2008, General Petraeus, who was at that time now the commanding general of Central Command, so in charge of all the American wars, throughout the Middle East, General Petraeus says that, in Afghanistan, as the United States is pivoting from Iraq to Afghanistan, General Petraeus in the fall of 2008 says, just as in Iraq, to paraphrase him, just as in Iraq, Afghanistan won't be ended. The war there won't be ended by military efforts. It'll be political efforts. And then, of course, he sees Afghanistan as a chance for military victory for his own vainglorious pursuits and desires, right? Let's not forget that in 2011, 2012, around that time frame, you have members of Congress who were advocated that David Petraeus should get a 5th star. So this is a man who has, throughout his career, going back to when he was a young officer, even at West Point, people can make arguments when he was there, that he has always been about promoting the idea of David Petraeus as the greatest general in modern American history. Certainly name recognition-wise, he has that among the American people. But you see that the way he talks to Ahmad al-Sharaa, al-Qaeda's boss in Syria, and the way he is just able to speak without any attachment to any principle, to any value, to any context, to any history, to any semblance of understanding or recalling what occurred in the Iraq War or anything shows exactly how dangerous a man like David Petraeus is. It also just shows as well too that you have a generation or two now of American military officers who understand that the way to be successful in the American military is to be an overtly political general like David Petraeus. And so Petraeus's legacy extends well beyond just the wars that we've been in, the wars that we still are in, but in terms of future generations of American leaders who will look at Petraeus and say, hey, look, if I want to get 4 stars, if I want to be on the cover of Newsweek magazine, right, I have to act as Petraeus acted. And, this is why ultimately his legacy is going to be so dangerous.
Yeah, great, fantastic points, Matt. Now, I want to move on and talk about an issue that you've been very active on over the years. In fact, a number of years ago, I remember watching a documentary where you, Ray McGovern, and other activists went into the West Bank and really showed how poorly Israel treated the Palestinians day after day after day. And rather than the narratives you hear about the Palestinians being these vicious neighbors, they're just these kind, normal people trying to live lives under the constant harassment of an occupying power.
Right.
And so, because in part of your great work and many, many other activists, and just how unbelievably horrible what Israel has done in Gaza is, the American favorability for Israel is slipping. I read a poll from the New York Times just today. I think 35% of Americans favor Palestinians versus 34% who favor Israelis. 40% of Americans believe Israel is intentionally killing civilians in Gaza. And this has apparently created a little bit of a problem and a crisis for Netanyahu. So this week he's in the US. He calls a summit of influencers. And I want to play this question that was asked of Netanyahu.
So something I would like to raise, which was actually my first published paper, was how you and the Likud party are cut from the same ideological cloth as Trump and the GOP in America. And so specifically with Charlie Kirk's assassination, who was a big mentor of mine, who's my first mentor in the space, evangelicals, from all my research, evangelicals are the reason that Israel has been supported in public sphere outside of just Jews. So with Charlie's assassination and with the kind of trajectory that we see with like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, I guess I'm curious about what's another game plan if we lose evangelical support for the state of Israel. What's our backup plan to be strong, like outside of the diaspora?
So, Matt, after this, Netanyahu responds by saying we need to weaponize TikTok and social media and put pressure on Elon Musk and X in order to crack down on the speech surrounding here. So, as one of the really leading activists on this issue, how concerned are you about the coming crackdown when it seems we are really starting to win the narrative among the general American public?
Oh, I'm very concerned. I'm glad you're bringing this up, Kyle, because when Netanyahu, as you were saying, was speaking to these social media influencers, he said the most important weapon was social media, and then among that was TikTok, and followed by Twitter or X, because they have seen the result of on the ground, raw, unfiltered, uncensored information getting to people, and what that does. You've had an American public that has been curated for decades now through major corporate media that is in line, not just sympathetic, but in line with the Israelis. As part of the American establishment, the media is in line with an Israel first policy. The major corporate media is in line with Israel first policy. And even that's starting to slip, because you've seen CNN. I mean, when I'm in the gym, I'll see CNN or MSNBC, not so much Fox, but I'll see them showing a lot more stuff that paints Israel in the true light it deserves that 2 years ago you have never have seen, right? Even a year ago, it was difficult to find on CNN or MSNBC the video that we could all see so clearly, so well on our phones anytime we opened up Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. And so the utility of social media is well understood. And that's why there is this attempt to control it, and this sale of TikTok, this forced sale of TikTok by the American government, which I think most of us, whether you're on the right or the left, will say this is just wrong. This is not what our government should be doing. The purposes, the reasons for that, have to do with them losing the narrative war. And the results, as you say, are clear. We've seen, because people see what Israel is doing daily, no amount of talking head propaganda is able to diffuse that, is able to ameliorate that. When I was in, you mentioned that documentary I was in when I went with colleagues from Veterans for Peace to Palestine in 2017. I remember being in Hebron and being in a hostel, and there were a couple younger folks. I can't remember where from Europe, but from Europe, and we were talking about the difference in public opinion in Europe compared to the United States. And I think our general realization was that people in Europe have been exposed for many more years to the true reality of the apartheid, the occupation, and now the ethnic cleansing that Israel has been conducting against the Palestinian people, not just for the last 2 years, but for the last 80 years or even longer, depending on when you want to pick a start date. So, the reason why the Europeans were ahead of us in their public opinion on Israel is because they were showing more, the people there were viewing the reality in a way that it's only been in the last year or two that American folks have, been given that opportunity to do so. And so now, of course, you see this really ominous desire by both the Israelis and the Americans to cut those off, could cut that ability to see the truth off. And so it's something that we have to be very concerned with. And I don't know how you go and create an alternative to something like that, but an alternative will come up. And when it does, we have to embrace it.
Yeah, I think one of the things at this point too, Matt, is people have just seen so much. I think for people who have seen the gruesome images, I mean, it's hard to even go and look at Dropside News's Eds account these days, because how many pictures of dead Palestinian
Right.
children do you need to see to know what's going on there? You don't have to look at that every day, and so it just sits with people. And while Netanyahu could go to the UN and claim that Hamas burned babies in front of their parents, everybody knows at this point that that's a lie. Or if they don't know, then they're never going to know. But
Right.
a lot of people do know that it's a lie. And so I think it's going to be very hard for Israel to turn this back, even if they alter algorithms and things like that. It's just people have already seen what they've seen.
Right. And I think, and people are savvy enough, particularly younger people are savvy enough to understand how the algorithms work. And they're aware of the sale of TikTok. And so I think that I don't know how you go setting up a new social media thing. And I don't have $10-20 billion to do it, but somebody does, and someone will. And where will it come out of? It will come out of Korea. Will it come out of China? Will it come out of Italy? Will it come out of Kenya? I don't know, but somebody will. And when that does, we have to embrace it and utilize it. And I think anytime you have uh, uh, any type of platform that is so heavy-handed, it's going to have only a strict constituency. So eventually, if this is what they're going to do with TikTok, well, then the constituency of TikTok is going to look like Fox News, right? And they're not going to have the effect that they want to have on younger generations that may be more open-minded, that are willing to change their minds on things. They're going to have a demographic that is, they might see, in between their politics, they're going to get adult diaper ads, because that's the demographic. And so I'm very concerned about it in the larger philosophical sense. I'm concerned in the short term. But as we talk about this, I am optimistic, as I am for all this type of media. What we're doing here, Kyle, is just simply, it was unavailable even 5 years ago. You and I have been doing this for a long time. 5 years ago, doing a live stream, it wasn't, we didn't do many of them like this. You recorded it and go back 10 years and the video it was not that great. You had your problems with it. So what we're embracing here in terms of this media, in terms of information, being able to exchange like this, people being able to get informed, people to educate others, being able to coordinate, cooperate. This is such an important arm of the body politic. And we're just learning it. We're just understanding it. So if people ask me, am I optimistic about things? I'm very pessimistic, as anyone who follows my work knows, But I am optimistic about what this technology allows us to do, what it has allowed us to do, and what it will allow us to do in the future.
Yeah, great insights there, Matt. I want to move on and ask you a couple questions about Netanyahu's speech to the United Nations. I'm sure you saw there was a fantastic walkout in the beginning, and walkouts maybe aren't that powerful if it's even half, but it was like 80 or 90% of the UN
Right.
General Assembly at Chamber turned their back. They waited until Netanyahu was about to speak. It's not that they didn't just show up. I'm sure they all knew he was going to speak. They turned up, and then they turned around and turned their backs and walked out after he was announced. And he was standing at the podium watching this happening, and I thought it was just quite a striking sight. I do have one clip or a couple clips, but one first I want to play for you. Netanyahu speaking at the United Nations.
Half the Houthi leadership in Yemen gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top atomic bomb scientists, well, they're gone too.
Matt, what do you make? A leader has a map of his regions just chucking off countries as he takes them out. Isn't this exactly what the UN was meant to prevent?
Right. This, I don't know what to call it. That stunt is in line with how Netanyahu operates, and we've seen him up there before with plenty of graphics and different gimmicks. I got to say though, I mean, as as an analyst of this stuff, he's not incorrect. The Israelis have been successful. The Israelis and the Americans, we always should put those two together, have been successful in defeating the axis of resistance, those 7 countries and militias that Netanyahu spoke of. They have been successful in executing a strategy, the Israelis and the Americans, to break them apart, to decapitate them, to hobble them, to deter them. The Yemenis keep going, but you've seen what occurred with Hezbollah. We certainly saw what occurred with Syria. He's not incorrect about the Iraqi militias. And, the Iranians and the Israelis fought to a draw. And I don't think anyone is willing to see that, wants to see that happen, a round 2 happen of it, or round 3, I guess, technically. So, he's not incorrect about that. Now, that doesn't mean that that policy is first of all, right or moral in any sense. Absolutely not. It also doesn't mean that it's smart long term. And everything that the Israelis seem to be banking on here is the continued support of America, the continued support of America as they have received it for decades, allows them to become the super Sparta that Netanyahu speaks of, right? This idea of fortress Israel, that is in line with how the Israelis and many Americans view Israel's place in the world, view Israel's place in terms of cosmic or biblical history. That this makes sense because of the universe that they live in. Israel is supposed to be surrounded by her enemies, and it's supposed to be Israel and God versus anyone. And in this sense, God, as represented by, say, Mammon or money, is the United States, right? So, as long as they have the backing of the Americans, the Israelis, and when I say the Israelis, it's not, we're talking about 70, 80% of Israelis are supportive of what Netanyahu's been doing. There's a slight dip in public opinion for the attacks on Qatar. But other than that, most Israelis, a super majority, were supportive of all these actions, including the genocide in Gaza. So as long as they feel they have the backing of the United States, they feel they can be this fortress Israel. Again, it aligns with their view of the world, of history, of the cosmos. And so even though they were successful, as I said, in terms of defeating, deterring, taking apart the axis of resistance in many ways, in terms of a long-term strategy, how effective is that going to be?
Yeah, no, fantastic points. I mean, starting off with, yeah, you got rid of Bashar al-Assad, but now you have Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani. Is
Exactly.
that? And look, he could brag about taking out and conducting strikes in Yemen, but just this week, Israel or Yemen hit a hotel in
Right.
southern Israel at a resort city, injured 22. That just today they bombed and apparently disabled a ship in the Gulf of Aden.
Mhm.
So they're certainly not defeated. And it seems far more likely that there's going to be civil war in Lebanon before Hezbollah is disarmed.
Right.
And maybe Israel sees a benefit to the chaos, but chaos isn't necessarily a good strategy in the long term either. So I'm not so sure this is the victory that Netanyahu thinks it is.
In particular, when when all of what's been occurring in Israel, including the domestic political turmoil and the schisms that exist in Israeli society itself. Remember, about a year ago, that the head of Shin Bet, the Israeli version of FBI, basically, said his biggest fear was terrorism, was violence within Israel. And there are Israeli commentators who will talk about a real, genuine fear of a civil war in Israel. So when you see 750,000 people protesting against, in a country of 8 million people, protesting against Netanyahu because he's corrupt and he should be in jail and everything, not protesting to stop the genocide, though, but protesting against the politics of the government, you have to remember there are 750,000 armed settlers who view those people, those Israeli Jews, as traitors. So there is a tinderbox here. And as you said, Kyle, to have chaos all around you, it may not be the controlled chaos it may not be the chaos that they think they can control, that they think they're masters of. And we've seen this over and over again. I mean, the Iraq War was meant to do a lot of these types of things, shape and manage the Middle East to Israel's benefit, right? And how did that work out in terms of stability in Israel for the West? I mean, stability in the Middle East for the West over the last couple of decades.
Yeah. Matt, I have one more clip for you. I want to play of Netanyahu speaking at the United Nations. This is him doing his best supervillain impression.
Thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried. They're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans.
Oh, God.
So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down.
So, man, isn't this crazy that he's just admitting that Israel has this kind of access to every phone in Gaza? And shouldn't this raise questions about how Israel is killing like 83% civilian rate if they could just access everyone's phones when they know exactly where all the civilians are, or who's Hamas, where they are?
Oh, they certainly do, right? And I think, again, getting back to our conversation earlier about the change in public opinion, people know this, right? They've seen this. First of all, they've been fed by Hollywood for decades about how technically competent, how smart, how capable the Mossad and the Israelis are, right? I mean, they've been fed this kind of storyline. There's an analyst out there named Elijah Manger. He just published an article last week taking that whole myth of the Mossad apart, and I recommend that to people. But, I mean, the idea being, if you can do that, why do you have to kill scores and scores of civilians every day? That 83% number you referenced, Kyle, that comes from the Israeli Defense Forces own database that was leaked by the Israeli media. And the Israeli media was clear that this is a low end estimate. It's probably higher than 83% are civilian. I mean, the estimates we're seeing coming from various NGOs and academics and others who've looked at this are saying that the ratio of civilians to resistance fighters killed is likely 8 or 10 or 12 to 1. And we have to remember as well, the Israelis have artificial intelligence programs, particularly, say, the Where's Daddy artificial intelligence program, that allows them to kill resistance fighters not when they are away from their families, but when they are with their families, so that when a resistance fighter enters his home, The Israelis know that he's now surrounded by his family and his neighbors, and that's when they choose to kill the resistance fighter, not when he's away from their family, but when he's with them. So just how diabolical this all there's no amount of props, there's no amount of gimmicks. The Israelis can pack the gallery of the UN, like you saw there in the video with their cheerleaders. They can do all they want, but the sordid, twisted, disgusting reality of this has been made clear. And where this goes, as we're speaking, we're getting reports of how it went with Netanyahu and Trump today. This peace plan that they supposedly agreed to, that Hamas up until an hour or two ago had never seen. The peace plan itself is incredibly vague, incredibly detailed. One commentator I heard, an former Israeli diplomat in Al Jazeera, he said it best. He's trying to figure out right now who Netanyahu is lying to, and I think that's what we have to realize here is we're dealing with genocidal maniacs, and that's not hyperbole.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that, Matt. Matt, if I have time to play one more clip for you, is that all right?
Yeah, no, plenty of time,
right.
pal.
Great. This is Tucker Carlson talking with Glenn Greenwald last week about the U.S. relationship with Israel.
This is a country of 9 million people. I'm not even attacking the country. I'm attacking my leaders who are allowing my nation of 350 million people to be forced into doing things that are bad for me and my children because of some other country. Like, that is a violation of the most basic arrangement we have with our leaders, which is represent us, please, at least most of the time, and they're not. And there's an ongoing humiliation ritual designed to make us all crazy, designed to turn us into haters. I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of becoming what they call me. I'm not a hater, and I'm never going to become one.
So, Matt, I want to ask you, because today, as you mentioned, Netanyahu is back in the United States meeting with Donald Trump for unprecedented fourth time in like 7-8 months here as president. What do you make of the special relationship with Israel? Do you see it like Tucker does, or as, the pro-Israeli influencers would, which is Likud and U.S. policy are tied at the hip, and for good reason?
Yeah, I mean, this is a torturous thing to try and pull apart, the evolution of it. Certainly, for me, I go back to the United States taking over from the British Empire. And the British, of course, in the words of their Governor General in Jerusalem, when they had their mandate in Palestine and controlled Palestine, particularly in the 30s, the Governor General of Jerusalem said, what we are doing here in Palestine is creating a loyal Jewish Ulster in a midst of hostile Arabs, right? And so the geopolitical importance of that, of having a Western colony, that's where this begins. And that's where this all emanates from. And then it becomes a chicken and egg argument over to the Israelis through AIPAC and other lobbying efforts, control the American politicians and media, or is it because an Israeli first policy is what the neoconservatives and liberal interventionists who dominate the Democratic and Republican parties believe in, that these are acolytes of Kissinger and they're acolytes of Brzezinski, and that just makes sense to them. As Richard Nixon said of Israel, Israel is our sheriff in the Middle East. But I go back to that larger geopolitical aspect of it, the colonial aspect of it, and then try and pull apart why these things are occurring, have been occurring in the way they are. But certainly, who controls who? We have a legalized bribery system in the United States that the Israelis have exploited like no one else has in terms of the international community. We've seen certainly corporations do that, but we've never seen a country exploit our legalized bribery system that we call politics here. But at the same time, too, again, there are generations of Americans in Washington, D.C. who have no perception of the world except one where Israeli interests are American interests.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant analysis, Matt. And thank you so much for your time today, sharing it with my audience. Everybody, this is why when Chris approached me about starting the Kyle Lanslow Show, at the absolute top of my list of people I wanted to interview was Matthew Hoh. You do fantastic work. Everybody, check out the new documentary that he's featured in, Bodyguard of Lies, and his Substack, matthewho.substack.com. Matt, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you, Kyle.